watching HW News. This is me, Anusha. So it's been 79 days that the Narendra Modi government took the decision to abrogate Article 370, the article of the Indian Constitution which gave special status to Jammu and Kashmir. The article, which is the subject of dispute between India and Pakistan and China since 1947. Like many other political compromises, the history of Article 370 is also rich as well as complex. But Prime Minister Modi and his government was always clear with its stand from the very beginning that it is an internal matter and India doesn't want any kind of third-party intervention. Article 370 would not have been discussed as much worldwide as it was done on September 22nd, the day when Prime Minister Modi along with US President Donald Trump ranked it up in Houston during their famous Howdy Modi event, where Modi even hit out at Pakistan, saying that some people do have problem with the nullification of Article 370. Now, post this event, Article 370 has become more international. It was during the United Nations General Assembly that India had a face-off with many other countries on Kashmir decision. Apart from Pakistan and China, well, there were countries like Turkey and Malaysia who had also criticized India's decision to abrogate Article 370. Now, recently, a group of US lawmakers had expressed concern about the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, pointing to the detention of local political leaders and activists and also the internet blackout over there. Now, at a hearing on human rights in South Asia held by a congressional subcommittee in Washington, Alice Wells, the acting US Assistant Secretary of State, though had welcomed India's action to normalize the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. However, the US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was pretty vocal against BJP government on matters like Kashmir and NRC list on Assam. Let us hear what she has to say.
Ambassador Wells, as you know, last month I led a letter to Ambassador Juster and Jones with you CC'd on it on the situation of Kashmir. Our partnership with India is strategic, but it's also based on our shared values of democracy, religious pluralism, and the respect of human rights. Under Modi and the BJP government, all of these mutual values have been threatened. And I think we have to understand the situation in Kashmir as part of an overall Hindu nationalism project of the BJP. So my first question to you is about the right of self-determination. Is the United States committed to emphasizing the centrality of Kashmir voices in determining the future of the Jammu and Kashmiri people?
I would disagree with the characterization that we don't have a values-based relationship with the government of Prime Minister Modi. And I would just underscore that Prime Minister Modi came in a consecutive term. He achieved a majority vote in a very diverse
we can agree to disagree on that. I just would like to understand if we are going to centralize the voices of the Kashmiri and
But just to provide context, I mean, the actions he took were approved in Parliament, including by members of the opposition. The Supreme Court is reviewing that decision. The High Court is reviewing habeas corpus petitions. The institutions of India's democracy are working. We absolutely believe that Kashmiri's voice needs to be heard, that in any restoration, when there is restoration of a of an assembly, when there are state assembly elections, that's the way for Kashmiris to be able to register their views, also in peaceful assembly. And so I think the concern over the restrictions on movement and what we've seen over the last 78 days is that ability to protest peacefully has been difficult for Kashmiris to exercise.
Yeah. I mean, and the part of the reason I asked and the part of the reason I emphasized the context of the larger BJP project is because I think the situation in Assam is as bad as Kashmir, if not worse. And I think in both cases, the impunity we have seen for crimes against Muslims under the BJP was warming for such worse things to come. In Assam, almost 2 million people are being asked to affirmatively approve their citizenship As my colleague and the chairman said, there have been official statements to the effect that no Buddhist, Christian, Sikh, or Jain refugees need to worry about their status. And so this is a clear anti-Muslim program. And I'm sure you've seen the same reports that the Indian government is starting to build camps in Assam, presumably to hold those who are unable to prove their citizenship. This is how the Rohingya genocide started. At what point do we no longer share values with India? Are we waiting for the Muslims in Assam to be put in those camps?
The certification of citizenship in Assam dates to a 2013 Supreme Court ruling that ordered the government to do so, to address questions of illegal immigration. The process, which continues to unfold and continues to be challenged in the court, it now has 1.9 million people who have not been certified. And that includes both Muslims and Hindus. There are 300 appeal panels that are being set up for those individuals to appeal this determination. And as my colleague stated, we're concerned that many of these individuals who may not have the wealth or the education to successfully be able to document their citizenship are vulnerable. We will continue to watch this very closely, but I would stress that the appeal process is still open. The judicial process is still working in India. And as a democracy, we respect other democracies' abilities to self-police and self-regulate. And so this process is underway. Our voices have been heard. Your voice is going to be heard. Obviously, there's international attention focused on this national citizenship registration.
Processes of legalities can take place under the justification of security and the such. The fact that there are public statements of having only Muslims prove their citizenship should be extremely alarming, and an excuse that we don't police other democracies is not one that should be acceptable to this committee or acceptable to the American people. We have to raise our voice of concern. We do that in many situations. There should not be an exception in this situation. Thank you, and I yield back.
Now, several representatives from South Asia were also present over there representing India. A journalist from Times of India, Aarti Singh, supporting India's stand on Kashmir, had said that Kashmiri Muslims have suffered most from terror attacks by Pakistan-sponsored terrorists, and this had even overlooked by Western activists and world media for years. Ms. Singh had also called the hearing prejudiced, biased, a setup against India and in favor of Pakistan.
I have to say that most of what you read in the Western press and some sections of Indian press is a distorted reality of Kashmir. While they're rightly highlighting the instances of violations committed by the Indian security forces, the story is often presented without context and a historical understanding, but it also carries a lot of certitude and self-righteousness of a narrative that helps the perpetrator and not the victim of human rights abuse in Kashmir. So let me tell you who the victim and the perpetrator of human rights abuse in Kashmir is. The victim is my friend, my Kashmiri Muslim friend, Shujat Bukhari. Who was Shujat Bukhari? Shujat was a senior journalist and a peace activist who believed in resolving Kashmir through dialogue between India and Pakistan. Shujat went from one capital city to another in the world, trying to convince powerful players that Kashmir needs peace. Several years ago, Shujat and I met here in the United States, and we spent a whole day discussing how we could put an end to the violence that Kashmir had seen and where both Hindus and Muslims had been destroyed. I heard him say that he wanted to see his children growing up in a plural and progressive Kashmir, that Kashmir used to be while we were growing up. We parted ways on a hopeful note. that one day Kashmir will be peaceful and we will live together as we used to in a syncretic culture once upon a time. We met several times in Delhi in the last few years debating and discussing Kashmir as we had resolved to. The last time we spoke on phone, he complained that I hadn't seen him whenever I visited Kashmir during every crisis. I promised that I will visit him next time. Shujat did not keep his part of the promise. On June 14, 2018, he was shot dead right outside of his office in Presclave area of Srinagar. Who shot dead Shujat Bukhari? Lashkar-e-Taiba, the same terror group that has been banned by the US, the same terror group that perpetrated Mumbai terror attacks. Why did they kill him? Because Shujat wanted Pakistan to end the violence and human rights abuse in Kashmir. They killed him because he wanted peace. Who is the victim in Kashmir? The victim is 65-year-old Ghulam Mohiddin Mir of Srinagar, who as a businessman would pay all his profits, zakat, charity, year after year to the poor in Kashmir. But just weeks ago, on August 29th, he was shot dead. By whom? By Pakistan-sponsored terrorists. Why? Because he had dared to open his shop, defying the orders of Jaish-e-Mohammed, the same terror group responsible for the kidnapping and beheading of Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl in 2002. Jaish, in the last 2 months, has been issuing posters warning Kashmiri Muslims not to resume their normal life. The victim is that 5-year-old girl, Asma Jan, who along with her father...
Excuse me, you know, opening statements are supposed to be 5 minutes. If you would wrap up.
I would really request you to give me just 2 more minutes.
I'm sorry, we have a very long panel here.
I'll
Every one of them has 20 minutes of information they want to impart.
I'll try to wrap it up. The fundamental point that I'm trying to make is the victims in Kashmir are the ones who have been killed and massacred by Pakistani-sponsored terrorists. The number of Kashmiri Muslims who have been killed in Kashmir is immense, and they have been victimized by Pakistani terror state. I just want to make the last point. But throughout these 30 years of conflict, throughout these 30 years of Islamic jihad and terror in Kashmir perpetrated by Pakistan has been completely ignored and overlooked by the world press. There is no human rights activist and no press in the world which feels that it is their moral obligation to talk or write about the victims of Pakistani terror in Kashmir. Thank you.
Now, Aarti Singh also had sharp exchange with US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who suggested that the journalist was catering to an audience back home and making incredibly dubious claims, to which Aarti said that the Western press had often presented a distorted reality of Kashmir worldwide. Well, we have also seen how the Turkish president, during his speech at the UNGA last month, criticized India's move to abrogate Article 370, after which the Indian government has decided to call off a proposed visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Turkey recently.
One of the problems to which the international community fails to devote enough attention is the Kashmiri conflict, awaiting a solution for 72 years. The stability and prosperity of South Asia cannot be separated from the Kashmiri issue. Despite the resolutions adopted by the United Nations Security Council, Kashmir is still besieged and 8 million people are still stuck in Kashmir. They cannot get out. In order for the Kashmiri people to look towards a safe future with their Pakistani and Indian neighbors, it is imperative to solve this problem through dialogue on the basis of justice and equality instead of conflict. Another issue that the world seems to remain indifferent is the humanitarian tragedy Rohingya Muslims are currently facing. The Independent Commission of Inquiry established under the United Nations has recorded the existence of a genocidal intent behind the events perpetrated in Myanmar's Rakhine State. Turkey will continue to carry out its initiatives and endeavors to ensure the security and fundamental rights of the Rohingyas, as well as the humanitarian relief activities we have undertaken since the first day. The invasions, the conflicts, and terrorist activities that continued in an uninterrupted fashion for almost 4 decades in Afghanistan have led to significant challenges at a global level. It is now time for peace and security to be restored. This is up to us to assume responsibility and take up action. Esteemed delegates, today one of the biggest threats to global peace and stability is the skyrocketing racist, xenophobic, discriminatory, and anti-Islamic rhetoric. Muslims are ranking number one who are the subjects of hate speech, discrimination, and defamation against their sacred values. The most striking example is the terrorist attack that took place last March in Christchurch in New Zealand. Just like the terrorist attack targeting Muslims in New Zealand was unacceptable, the acts of terrorism targeting Christians in Sri Lanka and Jewish communities in the United States are equally wrong and unacceptable. We are responsible for turning this disease into a raging insanity.
Now, meanwhile, Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad had said that he would not retract his criticism of New Delhi's action in Kashmir, even though Indian traders have urged a boycott of Malaysian palm oil. India's top vegetable oil trade body asked its members to stop buying Malaysian palm oil after Mahathir said at the UN General Assembly last month that India had invaded and occupied Kashmir. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad stood by his remark on Kashmir, stating that he believes in speaking his mind. The assertion came days after the Ministry of External Affairs expressed regret over the Southeast Asian country, claiming in the United Nations General Assembly last month that India had invaded and occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Let us hear what the Prime Minister said.
Yesterday, the Indian Vegetable Oil Traders Association issued a letter asking members to stop buying Malaysian palm oil as a boycott and speech of anger. So, is the government going to take any steps to address this?
We'll study the effect of their boycott, but what is important is that their government has not said anything. So we will see what the government policy is going to be like.
So you're not worried about strained relationship?
Yeah, sometimes we have to have a strained relationship, but we want to be friendly with people. Malaysia is a trading nation. We need markets, so we are nice to people. But also we have to speak up for people. So sometimes what we say is liked by some and disliked by others.
Are you going to talk to the Indian government about this boycott, or are you going to wait for them to?
No, this is not the Indian government. So we'll have to find out how we can communicate with these people. Because we are trade is a two-way thing, and it is bad for having what amounts to a trade war.
Will you be reporting India to WTO for the trade?
At the moment, no.
Regarding the Indian issue, so there's been so much backlash against what you said about Kashmir. So are you going to retract what you said or apologize for what you said about Kashmir?
We speak out our minds, and we don't retract and change. We felt that the people of Kashmir have been given this, have benefited from the resolution of the UN. And all we are saying is that we should all abide, not just India, not just Pakistan, but even America and other countries should abide by the resolution of the UN. Otherwise, what's the good of having the UN?
Now, while the Indian government says that it has lifted up the curfew imposed and restored the communication and internet lines in Kashmir, the valley in some parts is still witnessing a lockdown. Apparently, media reports say that it is a kind of self-imposed curfew by the people, but the government say that the curfew is being called by the militant and has asked people not to fall for it. And to let us know what you think in the comment box below. For more news updates, log on to www.hwnews.in.